Hello and welcome to the Oddschecker Goodwood preview. This is the preview of day 3 of the Guitar Goodwood Festival, Glorious Goodwood, as we have always known it. And I'm joined by two experts in the field, hoping to provide many a winner for all of you listening and watching. We've got Oddschecker's very own tipster, Andy Holding, and Sam Turner as well, the tipster for the Daily Mail, joining us too. Two good friends on and off the track, but today being joined over Skype with myself. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us today.
Yeah,
cheers, George. Good to be here.
Good stuff. Let's get straight into the racing. As I mentioned, we are previewing Thursday's racing here, so day 3. We're recording just after 11 o'clock on Monday. So it's fair to say 3 days before, we're still 24 hours away from final decks for the day. So a couple of these races we're talking about will cut up a fair bit, but we'll try and keep you posted with that and try and kind of caveat all our tips just to make sure you are aware that there's no guarantee that these horses will necessarily run. The first race there isn't a market for at the moment. That is the Mirabeau en Provence handicap, the 110 at Goodwood. There isn't a market up on the Oddschecker site yet for this race. There will be probably tomorrow afternoon. But as ever with these ones, guys, is there anything you've seen in this race that takes your fancy at this early stage? Or should we move straight on to the second race, which we can preview in a bit more depth?
Yeah, I think Electric Ladyland's got to be shortlist material in that first race. Not really my kind of bag of 5 furlong sprint handicap 3-year-olds to kick off the card. But as Sam will well allude to as well, she's been clocking some good numbers this season, particularly the one at Windsor when she beat a decent field. Her sectionals are very good as well. I think she did 32 and change, which I don't think I got anything doing that kind of split at the Berkshire Venue this season. And she's, of course, some distance win as well. So if she bags a decent draw, she's probably one to put in your permutations in the first race. But yeah, it's too early on the card, or too early in advance to have a real strong view.
So Electric Ladyland there for Archie Watson, already dropped up by Holly Doyle, and a pretty potent duo those two are as well. Sam, anything to add to that before we move on?
Yeah, other than she'd be on my shortlist as well, along with Magical Journey, who was second to Love Powerful on soft ground at Haydock. I don't really think that saw her to the best of lights. I think now the ground's probably going to dry up by the Thursday with some nice weather moving in across Sussex. So I think Magical Journey would be a player there. Electric Ladyland, 2 from 2 for Holly Doyle. Obviously a Goodwood winner, goes on any ground. I think she's very versatile filly, loads of speed. The stable continue to churn out winners. And obviously Holly, she's almost pushing 40 winners already this year. She's been astonishing. So those two would be my shortlist at this early stage.
Absolutely. Then the top 2, Magical Journey and Electric Ladyland, the 2 to look out for here in the first. We'll now move on to the previews proper. And before we do so, I just want to point you in the direction of the Oddschecker app. It is the best place to find the best prices, the best bookie offers, the best free bets, and of course, some of the best tipsters around. I'm aware we've got one on the line who you can't find there, but with Andy, you have one of the best in the business, and you can find those tips exclusively on the Oddschecker app every morning throughout the year. So this is the Unibet You're Hired handicap, the Thursday, the second race of the day, the 145. And Zabeel Champion is the current market leader at 13-2. Matthew Power 7-1, Magical Morning 8-1, Magnetized 9-1, HMS President and Bright Melody and Alsate all 10-1, 12-1 bar. There are plenty in this at the moment. We can expect a good fair few of them to come out, you'd think. But at this early stage, Andy, who is catching your attention?
Well, it's certainly a race that's now watered down because of the 1.25 mile handicap, similar type race on the day before, with the likes of Mambo Knights and Sarvan going in other directions. They're going down the 1.5 mile route. Surprisingly, Zabeel Champion, having won probably the best 1.25 mile race run so far this season in this category, 3-year-olds, middle distance. That race at Newmarket he won. He's now they've decided to bump him up to 1.5 miles. He certainly doesn't lack the stamina based on his run when he won at Newmarket, and he's a big, strong type, so he'll just keep galloping. He's likely to be a very short-ish price favourite. I'd certainly have a lot of time for Matthew Power as well, who I thought impressed with his manner of his victory at Haydock. It was a very competitive field. It was quite an inclement day. It went on the soft side, and he really did grind it out. He always looked in control. and I think the handicappers still might not have fully got him off a mark of 85. And then you've got one or two refugees from the big King George handicap at Ascot down the line. Winner Clock, he didn't get the best of runs through that day. He's gone on to win subsequently at Leicester. I think he's a nice horse going forward. Plenty of others you can throw into the mix. But yeah, those have been my shortlisted horses anyway, looking at these in advance.
So Winner Clock, the only one I hadn't mentioned there, was next on the list at 12-1 across the board. Sam?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that Andy makes that obviously we've got a number of these sort of handicaps across the week, and with a long meeting such as this, 5 days, a lot of these horses have double entries. And obviously Zabeel, the favourite Zabeel Champion, had I think 2 or 3 entries, so that I wouldn't be surprised if he takes up a couple of them, knowing the way that Mark Johnson operates at this meeting and the fact that he's not bringing the team down from Midland that he would do in normal years as well. So he might look to get a little bit more out of the ones that he actually has there. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him ship up in a couple of these races to be a champion. The one horse that catches my eye a little bit here, and the Cole team have already pulled this off this year with winning with a top weight in a good quality handicap with Highland Chief, is Celtic Art. And the Hayes, the owners, Fitri Hay and his wife, they really love Fitri Hay and his husband, really love a winner at Goodwood. So I think Celtic Art makes plenty of appeal. Will go on any ground. I think he's ready for a step up in trip. Having watched a couple of his races from last year, obviously finished second to Malatham in the Convivial at York. I mean, that's red hot form. And has been around Goodwood a couple of times. I think with a decent draw, I think 14-1 for Celtic Art is quite appealing. And the other one that I quite like the look of, because the race is just starting to work out quite well, is Fiji. Second at Newcastle last time. The horse has already come out of that and won. He's been around Goodwood, albeit behind Khalifa Sat even. Didn't quite get the trip that day. I think back over a mile and a quarter in handicap company. Off 87, that looks a very fair handicap mark to me on what he's done so far. So he was another one at sort of 16-1 that made some appeal at this early stage.
Sam, that 16-1 you mentioned is all gone, I'm afraid. But VBet are out with the classic price of 13-1, that age-old favourite of the
yeah. The Fiji, one I always like.
Unlucky for many, but hopefully not this
yes.
time. But Fiji is 13-1 at the moment, best price with VBet, 12-1 elsewhere for David Simcock. And you mentioned the Paul Cole and Ollie Cole horse. Celtic Art is 14-1 as it stands with Bet365 and Sky Bet. And look at the form figures, just 5 starts, and since finishing 11th on debut, form figures of second, first, and second. You'd be hopeful for a run for your money, and 2 of those runs coming at Goodwood, as you mentioned as well. So a fair case to be made there.
It's also the only entry he's got this week as well, so I'd be surprised if he didn't take that up.
You can go into it with some confidence. You'll be getting a run for your money. Should point out just here that if you do back any of these and they come out because it's before final decks, you will lose your money. It won't be refunded. So ensure that you do your research into whether or not they're going to run. And it's probably worth just waiting until the final decks to have your bet, just to make sure that you are going to be covered by the non-runner insurance that bookies will apply after that. Anything else to add before we move on to the Richmond Stakes?
No, that's me done.
Yeah, same here. Yep.
We will move on then to the Richmond, and Yazaman is the 11-4 favourite ahead of Admiral Nelson at 9-2. Cada is 5-1, Supremacy 6-1, Gussie Mack 8-1, Army of India 17-1, 10-1 Bar. Sam, we'll come to you first here just to mix it up a little bit. Can't let Andy get first run every time. 6 furlong affair. As we say, yeah, it is at the top of the market. We have William Haggis and Tom Marquand, another potent duo. But Yazaman, do you think he's a fair favourite?
I do, because I think both of those recent runs, obviously at Ascot and last time at Newmarket in the July Stakes, were top efforts. I think he's a clear form pick. I was taken with the fact that he stepped up from 5 to 6. Has he looked as though he would, really? I mean, he had a pretty traumatic run at Ascot and the Windsor Castle, but really emerged with plenty of credit. Tactical got the dream run at the Stands Rail, whereas Yazaman didn't get a particularly clear passage through, and I still thought he ran absolute blinding race, really, for a big price. And then he backed that up, and Tactical confirmed the placings, but he'd obviously thrived, progressed, and really appreciated the stretch out to 6 furlongs himself. So I don't think there was anything disgraceful about the defeat for Yazaman. I think William Haggis has run 4 horses in this in the last 10 years. One's won, the other 2 have been placed. So he's only had 1 loser in 4, and it just looks a natural stepping stone for Yazaman. I thought he would be my first choice. And the other one I quite like was Supremacy, whose form from Windsor has already taken a boost. Should have taken a couple more boosts as well. I thought Collins Bay was unlucky not to win at Ascot over the weekend, and he was held back in 3rd. Night on Earth, who we'll perhaps talk about later in the pod, was well down the field and came out and bolted up next time out at Windsor. So those are really, really good efforts, I think, in behind Supremacy, who's going the right way at the moment. And obviously the draw has some bearing on this race, obviously with it being a straight track race, but I'd be disappointed if he didn't go well and build on what he's already achieved, Supremacy, given the times that he's clocked.
A compelling case there made there, Andy.
Yeah, I'd be on the same hymn sheet with Yazaman with Sam. Lots to like about his Ascot run. He was drawn 4 that day. Sam's already alluded to. He did really well to get within hailing distance of a very impressive winner who went on to confirm that run with a victory in the July Stakes. He beat Carter fair and square. Carter had the run of the race from the front and couldn't put him away. And really, Carter kind of represented the worst of the one of the worst of the 2-year-old races at Ascot on the figures, and that was the Coventry, which bizarrely threw up a really bad figure for once this year. So it tended to suggest that we're dealing with not a particularly strong 6 furlong category. The ones that have moved up from the 5 furlong category into that group have gone a little bit better. And Admiral Nelson, of course, who was favourite to win the Coventry, also let the team down as well. So you really want to be against Carter and Admiral Nelson, and they're priced up sort of in and around a 3-1, 4-1 mark. So if you didn't want to back Yazaman, and I do think, by the way, 11-4 is a big price, I think he should be a good deal shorter based on form and a Ascot run. Sam's mentioned Supremacy. I'd probably throw in Gussie Mack into the argument, who caught the eye first time out, having a bad trip through in that Eye of Heaven race at Newmarket. He went to Wolverhampton, won a fairly low race, and struggled to beat one of Hugh and Morrison's, who subsequently got beat, called Rooster. So that form alone won't stand him in good stead. But I thought he was really good at Sandown last time out. He was off the speed, and he run down a horse of Carl Burt's called Significantly late on. The time figure was good for that race. His last 2 furlong split was good. And I think we always tend to underestimate all the market, and punters do. Horses trained by Roger Till, but as we saw with Oxted, he's very much a man to have on your side at these big meetings. And you do get good bang for your buck backing one of his, because they should be a lot shorter in the market than what they are for what they've done on the course. And he's around about 8-1. So if I wasn't going to back Yazaman, I could have a bet now, thinking, well, if there's a couple of non-runners and it goes out to 7, then he'd be one I'd be looking to get with, because Jack Mitchell is already jocked up to run, so I presume he'll come here.
You've mentioned Andy taking on the Coventry form. Do you think that because of the high-profile nature of those races, often horses that have run well at Ascot, I mean, even someone like Carter who finished 4th, do you think there's an angle here to basically get against those high-profile horses who've had a high-profile run and side with those who maybe come into this, with this being their first test on the bigger stage?
Well, definitely. I mean, normally you'd just say the Coventry form is good without knowing the sort of facts. But the tangible evidence that me and Sam have, obviously having done time figures for years now, is that there's usually a benchmark for a group race, 2-year-old race at Ascot. And that was well below what you'd normally expect. Without getting into the sort of finer details of what they should have run to, it was probably around about 3 or 4 lengths slower than what you'd normally expect. And so therefore you look for the clues out of the race. Is it as bad as what you think? Or is the figures just not telling you the full story? And straight away, you've only got to look down to the ones that have run out of it. They've all run below pole. They haven't won. Saika was disappointing the other day. Obviously, the runner-up Carter got beaten. There's plenty of others as well down the line who've either struggled or failed to sort of build on that. Yes, 1 or 2 have run well, and there has been winners, Army of India, right the way down the list. But generally speaking, of the ones that were heavily involved in the front end of that race, haven't really gone forward as the general public, if you like, would have thought they would. So, yeah, I'd be looking to get against most of those horses, because they are still priced up as though they've ran well in the Coventry, and the Coventry is still the race that everyone thinks is, one of the better ones from the festival.
A nice angle there. Yazaman 11-4 pretty much across the board. Sam mentioned Supremacy, who's 6-1 with a few firms, and Gussie Mack is 8-1. That's with Sky Bet, Betfair, Sportsbook, Bet Victor, Paddy Power, Boyle Sports, and Genting Bet. That's the one that Andy gave a positive mention for Roger Teal. On now to the Gordon Stakes, the John Pierce Racing Gordon Stakes, and we have English King at the top of the market at 5-2. The former Derby favourite, Tiger Moth 5-1 alongside Al Assi, Khalifa Sat 11-2, Mogul 6-1, Delphi 10-1 alongside a few others at double figure prices as well. Andy, coming to you first here, and let's start at the top end of the market because it's pretty hard to really know what to make of those in here, such as English King and Mogul, who ran in what was one of the more surprising Derby results and the way the race panned out as well. So how do you analyse their performance in that race?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, really? I mean, it was just a bizarre race. Obviously, we know crowd first and foremost, but the way it developed, I haven't seen a Derby pan out like that since Sipanka won it many years ago when he got a long lead. I don't think we should decry from Serpentine's victory. I think he was the best horse in the race on the day. Yes, he might have nicked a few lengths at the start, but he started to maintain what looked a very strong gallop from the start. And obviously, he faltered late on, and one or two horses were closing and were big eye catchers, such as English King. But I think Serpentine would probably beat that field most times over. Depends on how you interpret the ones in behind and how they figured. You know, Khalifa Set, who looked like he's going to come here, chase the pace, and he was second best on the day. But then you look back at English King and think, well, he was around about 10 lengths behind Khalifa Set coming down Tatton Corner, and he's whittled the margin down to around about 3 or 4 lengths. So there is a school of thought to think English King will turn the form around with Khalifa Set. And then you've got the added uncertainty of how many Aidan O'Brien's going to run. He's got 6 entered up. I presume he'll run one of his main ones in inverted commas, i.e. maybe a Tiger Moth, and then run for want of a better phrase, a sacrificial lamb or a foot soldier to make the run-in, or to give him an extra dimension to the race, just in case there's no pace. I don't know which one he is going to run, but if he ran Tiger Moth, then, you know, he's second in the Irish Derby, represents a good line of form, chasing home Santiago. And Tiger Moth ties in with the likes of Serpentine and one or two others like your Dawn Risings, who ran in that Galileo Crown race at the Curragh. And that brings me on to Al Arzi as well, who, of course, beat Dawn Rising in the Bahrain Trophy quite nicely, I thought, quite snugly. It was a race that they went a good gallop, and he outstayed him, didn't he, the Haggis runner? And, of course, he then, before that, was involved in that helter-skelter gallop at Newmarket behind the likes of Vulcan Star and was it Thunderous? I think was in that race as well, was he not? I think Sam might be able to jig my memory with that.
Mishriff was a winner.
Mishriff, yes. We're talking about horses that finished down the line. And that form is just absolutely red hot. I think the St. Ledger's been muted as Al Arzi's long-term plan. So if he wins this, maybe he might go to the Voltigeur and then maybe straight onto the St. Ledger. But, you know, it's a fascinating race. If you gave me a bet at the prices now, if I could get an each-way bet on Al Arzi, that would probably be the route I'd go down at this very moment in time.
Al Arzi, as I mentioned at the beginning of the discussion on this race, 5-1, and that is with William Hill and 888 Sport and Genting Bet. Sam, how do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's one of the races of the week, to be honest. You know, I'm not sure I've always said that about the Gordon Stakes, if I'm totally truthful, but I think it's an absolute belting race this year, obviously with the Derby form being brought in by the likes of English King and Khalifa Sat. And, you know, it's probably the first real measure that we'll have about the strength of that race. So that's fascinating. But, you know, it's not as if they're just, you know, lining up and taking on, you know, one or two also runs here. Like Andy, I've got a lot of time for Al Arzi. I've been really quite a public advocate for the Mishriff form since doing the times, really, in the sectional times, and the way that Mishriff sectional stacked up well against the Guineas that weekend. And thankfully, the form's actually been, you know, played out really well. You know, Vulcan Star, Cherokee Trail, Al Arzi itself, even the First King winning a handicap last week at Sandown at 50-1, you know, and he was tailed off. He was beaten after 4 furlongs. So it's absolutely red hot form. I think there was a few question marks at the time among the Haggis camp about, how can Al-Azi run so badly, really? Because I think he went into that race with a fair bit of quiet, stable confidence about him. But he put that race out of his mind, really, with a good performance next time out on soft ground. And then obviously won the Bahrain Trophy in really, really grand fashion. I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on for the St. Leger. It might be worth getting involved in the anti-post markets for that race. So I think he'd be my number one, and I think Tiger Moth would be very close to being my number two if he ran in the race, if he was allowed to take his chance. Obviously, the Leopardstown Maiden, which I know Andy's a big fan of, thrown up 7 or 8 winners subsequently. Obviously, he's got classic form off the back of that Santiago performance, as well at the Curragh last time. Obviously in the Irish Derby, which is another great run, only his 3rd run of his career, and to step forward from a maiden into that race was a terrific effort. So those two, they're the ones I like at the moment. Obviously, we're not sure whether either of them will handle the track particularly. This is a rather unorthodox test, as we know, and it'll be a bit more of a test of their mettle and attitude and temperament. But at least Al-Azi's been at both Newmarket tracks, providing he copes with a little bit of travelling. Same can be said for Tiger Moth, and I think both of them look sure to run big races. It's
almost like you guys talk quite a lot about horse racing, because you both come up with the same one again.
We are obviously intrinsically linked through the speed ratings that I produce and the sectional times that Andy produces. So obviously there is a link and a correlation there. And I suppose after knowing each other for 30 years, we both tend to look for the same thing. You know what they say, fools rarely differ, George. So that'll be the case.
That same thing is winners, Sam, and that's what people listening and viewing want to get out of you. But yeah, I mean, you've made a very compelling case, of course, for Al-Azi at 5-1, and this is a Glorious Goodwood podcast or video, and you've given us a St. Leger tip as well. Al-Azi is 10-1 for the Leger with Bet365, Sky Bet, William Hill 888, and Bet Victor currently 3rd in the market behind Santiago and Love. So that is the Gordon Stakes there. We'll move on now to this penultimate race we're going to be previewing on the Thursday of Glorious Goodwood, before there are a couple of races towards the end, which we'll do the same. We'll flag up any horses that make appeal at the moment. And for the Nassau, we have Fancy Blue is the 7-2 favourite as it stands. Nazif 7-2 joint favourite. Magic One 9-2. Deirdre 5-1. Queen Power 10-1. One Voice 14-1. Lavender's Blue 20-1. Sam, come to you first here. Shame. I know what Andy's going to say, so I'll preempt it. 7 runners, bit of a blow.
Yeah. Obviously, Torquil not running is a bit of a blow as well for the race, because she would have been a fantastic contender really in this race. But obviously, the Hamdan team are happy to settle with Nazif, and understandably so, really, because she's done exceptionally well to keep improving. I think she's improved probably a stone since we saw her on the all-weather at Kempton beating Bilston Brook. She managed to do that again on soft ground at Newmarket last time when we last saw her in the Farmers Stakes. I'm probably going to be a little bit obvious, really, and just stick with last year's form, if I'm honest. And, Deirdre, I thought shaped with a good bit of promise at Sandown. I don't think that was her ultimate target this year. I think a lot of her training and conditioning has been sort of centred around this race, if I'm honest. I thought she ran quite nicely behind Gaeth. We've already seen the form thoroughly advertised subsequently. She just got a little bit outpaced between the 3 and the 2, probably at Sandown, but she was going on again at the line and closing back in on Magic Wand. And I thought that was a really nice race, just bringing her forward from that run in Japan back at the end of February. So I'd probably just take a chance with her. It'd be probably a small win bet for me. It's not a race that I'm particularly dogmatic about, because I'm very fearful that the 3-year-olds like Fancy Blue and the 4-year-old Nazif could step forward quite markedly on what they've achieved. But yeah, I just think that Coral Eclipse form is pretty rock solid, if I'm honest, although Japan ran poorly, but he might just have recovered off having to chase Gaeth, the beast that is Gaeth. So Deirdre wasn't quite in the heat of battle for as long as him. We've seen an able boost the form, so I'll be happy with her at 5-1.
5-1 Deirdre at the moment with 888 Sport. Andy?
Yeah, it's good, solid course and distance form, like Sam's already alluded to. It's hard to get away from her credentials, having run respectably, I thought, in the Eclipse. She just looked a little bit flat-footed, as Sam said. There wasn't really much spark about her that day. I thought she just plugged on at the 1 speed, and you could make a strong case for Magic Wand upholding that form, who went by quite readily, and then kept the sort of 2-length advantage all the way to the line. So toss of the coin between those two, really. But I suppose Deirdre's got the advantage of running over this track, which quite a few of these haven't, including the favourite as well, Nausea, which has got to be a point worth making. She's fairly versatile in running at Ascot, Newmarket, and flat tracks as well, such as Kempton. So it's not as if she hasn't gone down a hill and up a hill. But you do like horses really that have gone round here before. I'm not sure Queen Power will stay. She just looks a very, very difficult horse to win with. She often looks like she is going to win, but then doesn't quite see it out. They've tried her over a mile and a quarter, tried her over a mile, and it hasn't quite worked. So we're really left with Fancy Blue, really. And I don't think there's a tougher 3-year-old filly than this one, having watched her on the first 2 runs. She hung tough in the Irish 1,000 guineas when just beaten by Stabber Companion Peaceful. But if you go back and watch her French Oaks victory, she got her head down that day and just did not want to give up. Alpine Star got a lovely ride off the front, and she just kept finding all the way down the long straight. And she looks a real terrier. And I think Donick O'Brien's got a very, very hardy individual in his stable there. And obviously with the 3-year-olds tend to do quite well in this race over the years. So I'd probably go against the conventional wisdom of track form and obviously the Eclipse form and take a little bit of a chance with her. It's a shame Torquil doesn't run, because I've been quite impressed with her of the period I was doing some French analysis. She was one of the ones that was doing some good times and actually being visually impressive. And One Voice was really unlucky as well at the Curragh last time. You go back and watch that race behind the Lemista, that would have won half the track if that would have got a clear run. And if Jessie brings her over, she adds an extra spice to the race. So you can make cases out for lots of these. Unfortunately, there's no each way betting, so it's got to be a win-only bet, and I'll go with Fancy Blue.
Fancy Blue, 7-2 best price at the moment, generally around about the 11-4 mark. Sky Bet 3-1, Betfair, Sportsbook and Paddy's at 130. Interesting to note that those two firms, Sportsbook and Paddy's, whose odds are of course linked and are the same, both have Nazif at 15-8. So they've taken a big stance on those top two in the market, favouring Nazif there. But for Andy, Fancy Blue, as I say, is 7-2 best price at the moment. The last race we're going to be analysing in detail on the Thursday is the Nursery, the Gusbourne Nursery. And again, there are plenty in there at the moment. You can expect the race to cut up a fair bit. But at the moment, William Bligh is the 6-1 favourite. Bonnie Rigg, 8-1. Running back, 9-1. Desert History, Basil Ikata, both 10-1. Calcutta Cup, 11-1. 12-1 bar, but plenty in there. So hoping that you guys can give us a couple of bullets to be armed with when the race does cut up. Andy?
I think they've got the right favourite, haven't they, Sam, here with William Bligh. That second behind Master of the Sea has been well advertised, with the winner going on to win at Newmarket in a Group 2 subsequently. And then he won very easily at Haydock, justifying favouritism. But both of those two performances have come on soft ground. So if the weather does dry out, and it's supposed to as well quite significantly as the week develops, he could be just one, not necessarily worth taking on, but just be a little bit more wary about. I think the Fitchery Hay duo down the bottom, both trained by Andrew Baldwin, are quite interesting, particularly Bonnie Rigg, who's got a mark of 77 off the back of 2 wins. But beat a horse last time out who got a freebie off the front at Newmarket. And I was really impressed by the way he quickened up and got the job done that day in a bit of a tactical affair, which did probably suit him. He comes out of half a decent maiden first time out. He's very difficult to assess, just having the two samples to go on, and his numbers haven't been able to develop. But my gut feeling is a mark of 77 is certainly something to work with. And if David Probert chooses him over Calcutta Cup, which I think he probably will, I think he ran behind Guru, didn't he, the other day in that good maiden at Newbury from a bad draw. Either one of those two are very interesting, but mostly Bonnie Rigg out of the two.
So as I mentioned, Bonnie Rigg second in the betting at the moment and is currently 8-1 best price. Calcutta Cup is 11-1. David Probert currently jocked up for both, which might suggest one of them will come out. So be fairly wary backing either now, I would probably suggest. Sam, where are you looking here?
Yeah, I'm a big Bonnie Rigg fan. Certainly be on my shortlist for this race. It is quite a lengthy shortlist, that's all I would say.
A long list.
Difficult race, yeah. It's a long shortlist. Drum Quinner, if he turned out again after that Beverley performance where he went up the rail, I thought he was interesting as well, but double figures. And there's one at a huge price, I think, probably 25 to 1. A horse called Broxy for Keith Dalgleish. Now, Keith's horses aren't running fantastically well at the moment, but he won that Musselburgh novice auction up at Musselburgh, surprisingly enough. The second, Grantley, didn't run too badly in New York. Similar race to this, but Samara Bay, who was fourth, it was only a small field, but Samara Bay came out and won very cosily at Catterick. I do think he could be quite nicely handicapped, Broxy. The kind of horse that might run well, but just bear in mind that there's been one winner of this race in the last 10 years that's had a double figure draw. I think that was a horse called More Than Ready for Richard Fahey. He was drawn 10 of 17. And then that horse was sold to run in Hong Kong, I think, and won 4 off the reel, 4 handicaps off the reel. So wow. That shows you it's quite difficult to try and overcome a wide draw in this race. And, you know, the single figure berths could be the ones just to concentrate on. We don't have that data and information to hand just as yet, but when they do finally come through the declarations, just factor that into your thinking, I think.
So maybe the advice here is to make your own long shortlist of the likes of William Bligh, Bonnie Rigg, John Keener. You mentioned Broxy there, and then wait for the draw to come out, see who has a low draw, and that's when you pull the trigger.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of firms, you know, there looks like there'll be a good declaration for this race. There's plenty of entries at the 5-day stage. I think with a lot of firms offering, you know, extended places as well, you could probably back 2 or 3 in there if the prices are right. So just look to play that way, I would.
So nice and patient. But as you say, Broxy 25 to 1 with a fair few firms as well. And that seems to be the way that Sam is leaning at the moment. We've got a couple of races to finish the day that at the moment aren't priced up. The 420 is a Maiden, and the 455 is another handicap. So starting with the Maiden, are there any horses entered that you guys are looking forward to seeing whether they run, let's say?
Sam, you can have first.
Yeah, I thought I might get thrown this ball first. In a word, I haven't done a lot of work on the race. I've been sort of predominantly looking at handicaps and the pattern races, if I'm honest. Yeah. Soft Whisper was a filly that I thought shaped pretty well at Salisbury. I know she was a beaten favourite that day, but it's very rare for Side Bin Siror to have a first-time out winner. She ran behind Prado. Prado did extremely well to win. I thought it was a really classy performance, and we haven't seen Soft Whisper since that day, back on the 11th of July. But I think she's been probably kept for this race. I'd imagine she'd step forward pretty markedly. Daughter of Debawi, if she gets a fair draw, then she could be one that's fairly interesting, but not a race I've done a lot of work on, to be honest, George.
Soft Whisper there. Andy, you are the 2-year-old king, let's say. So are you going to give away your secrets now, or are you going to make us wait till Thursday morning?
Yeah, I wouldn't be looking to have a bet in the Maiden at this stage, but I'll be very interested to see the betting coming through for the final race. There's a horse trained by Nigel Tinker called Acclam Express that I was really impressed with at Hamilton. I don't watch many Hamilton races nowadays, or certainly bet there anyway. But having done his sectionals, he looked a very good horse when he won that day. Sam backed it up with the time figure that he sent me that horse doing, and it's very difficult to sort of equate that into what he's likely to do outside of just northern modest form. But I've just got a sneaky feeling he's above average, and it's not as if Nigel Tinker hasn't got the odd decent 2-year-old in his midst this season. You better believe it. Who won at Sandown the other day, that Group 3 contest? He looks very good, and he won not a similar race at Doncaster the time before, but it was obviously a race with regards to stepping stone for the future. I think my mark of 77 could well underestimate this horse in quite a big way, and because it's a Tinkle horse down south and there's going to be, you know, several big names here, he might well just slip under the radar. I'm not sure who will ride, so if he does get a decent solid jockey booking, I'm looking down the list here. I don't see Ocean Murphy down for anybody. Let's say one of the big boys gets the leg up on him, and I'm sure Connections will look to get someone half decent. He could be very much worth more than a second look.
Acclam Express there, one to look out for when the prices come up for the last race of the day, the 455, the 5 furlong nursery on the Thursday. Sam, any in there for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Andy alluded to, the speed figures I got for him were very, very good at Hamilton. I would have thought Rowan Scott would probably ride, but you never know. Nigel Tinkler might get one of the top boys or girls. I mean, he used Holly Doyle a number of times on Queso, so that'd be a great booking. Just depends on what other horses she might be claimed for. The other one I like is Different Face, who beat a horse that Andy knows pretty well, of George Scott's, bundled up in blue. It was a good speed figure at Lingfield. I noticed that Christopher had her in 2 races, a conditions race on the first day, I think, or maybe the Wednesday, and also in this race. So I don't think she's running early on in the week. So I would imagine off a mark of 77, they can't resist having a tilt at this race. Obviously, they've had 8 winners in the last couple of weeks. So they've been going great guns. I thought, with William Buick jocked up as well, those 2, Acclam Express and Different Face, would definitely be my first port of call when looking at this race.
She was second to Yazaman as well, first time up. Only got beat a length at Yarmouth, so you could argue that collaterally she's done really well to get in here off 77. So the 2 77 rated horses there, me and Sam are very much suggesting they could be, way better or way beyond what they've been given.
I'm smelling a related each way double there on the day, maybe with the Different Face and Yamazan, but yes. We will see on the day. Looking forward to that market opening up then in the last race of the day. A couple there to keep an eye on in Different Face for the father-son combination of Simon and Ed Crisford, and the Acclam Express for Nigel Tinkler. Thank you both very much for joining me today on Monday to preview Thursday's racing. Andy and I chatted through Tuesday's card before the weekend, and that's been live both on YouTube and on all podcast channels since then. Before recording this, we recorded a Wednesday preview as well. So if you're listening to this before Wednesday and you want to see that, then you can find it in the same places. Thank you very much to both Andy and to Sam for joining me. You can find all of Andy's tips on the oddschecker app. I implore you, if you're listening to this podcast, you're watching this video, it's because you like your racing and you like your betting. So I implore you to get the oddschecker app, the best place for all bookie offers, free bets, best prices, and some of the best tipsters. Enjoy the racing, and most importantly, please gamble responsibly.